Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure and privilege to have been invited to address you at this METRO Chef Conference in Odessa today. I am rather saddened and disappointed that I'm unable to attend and stand before you in person. There's nothing better than attending and standing in front of a crowd of people and being able to see the responses. But alas, technology allows us to be here with you in part, if not in whole. Between you and me, I very much dislike having to communicate over Zoom. It does make the communication a little bit more challenging. It's possibly a bit like delivering takeaway service from a restaurant in lockdown. We don't attain the feedback, the joy or the pleasure of watching customers relax, feel the environmental buzz, witness the reactions on faces. And when you see the dishes that you've prepared, I miss the general interaction, communication, eye contact, body language. They're all part of the business. And as a chef and now at the moment as a speaker, they are key elements to which I personally thrive upon. I know that when you start to look away or shuffle on your seat, I need to change the pace, the tone of voice, or even subject matter. And when I tell a joke or humorous story, I can gauge the level and tone which I'm able best to communicate that storyline to you. But with such restrictions, I'll do my best with the best that we're able to do in these current situations and restrictions. And at this moment in time, I can't even see anybody or even if there's anybody in the room. So let's crack on with it. Now, the organizers have kindly asked me to discuss or at least cover a few areas today, such as how to reduce food costs of a dish, how to create stunning plate of food using local ingredients, and the importance of seasonality. Whenever I'm asked a question, I feel that it's only right not to give you a direct answer. Not because I'm mean, but it would simply be wrong. It prevents the actual learning process. We are, as we know, so many different types of people. We work with different styles of food and beverage and different operations. Each one has a point of difference. And like each one of you listening to me today, each one of you are individuals. On this basis, my answer will be general and open for you to take from it whatever you feel may best work for you as an individual for your individual operation. Let's start off then with how to reduce food costs from a dish. It's a massive question, and I would need to look at each dish realistically to be able to prescribe the best and most suitable way for you to achieve this. Other than turning every restaurant on this planet into a franchise or a pizza or pasta restaurant where your GP versus what the clients are happy to spend, they are possibly the most financially achievable. And hence one of the reasons there are so many around. Low production costs, controlled portion sizes, client perception of obtaining large volumes of food, that big pizza, that big bowl of pasta, limited staff and overheads in the kitchen, limited setup and running costs, limited training. These are just a few on how to keep your food costs low. However, as chefs working on a different level, we need to look at things in a slightly different way. Whilst there's financially good GPs to be made, none of us here would like to see every restaurant turned into a pizzeria or a franchise. Instead, I'm going to offer you a longer answer, but one that I hope is going to be relevant, not only to this particular question, but to many more including. Let's start off by talking, or should I say, let's start off on taking you on a culinary career journey. How many of you enjoy history? I can't hear an answer. That's one of the joys of Zoom. But you made some, I asked that question once to a load of students, and I think 3 out of 25 put their hand up and said that they like food history. I was disappointed with that answer. So I hope in that audience there's a few more of you that enjoy history. The reason I ask is due to not only because it's a passion of mine, it's the fact that I believe in the food history and the food originations are one of the most important factors. And I also believe that if you fail to look at history, it will be at your own peril. I want to go back to my own personal history. I'm going back, I won't tell you how many years, but I was at the age of 14 when I started working in restaurants and hotels at weekends and in school holidays. Alas, at that age, I was too young to work in kitchens. There were legal restrictions. So I helped out as a waiter. At the age of 16, I went to catering college and continued to work in restaurants. But this time, I was able to transfer over into the kitchen and work evenings, weekends, and holidays. Loved it. College during the day, working in a restaurant at night. However, one of my first jobs at the age of 16, and one that I must admit has been the most important in my entire career, none more so than in the latter days of my career, when I was looking after the hors d'oeuvre trolley. It was only a small 50-seater restaurant. Now, the hors d'oeuvre goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, and most countries have something similar. Mezzes, tapas, think of it in that line. But the hors d'oeuvre trolley itself became, I'm smiling because I can remember it so vividly. The hors d'oeuvre trolley came along in most parts of European restaurants and certainly across the UK, around about the 1960s, I believe. Yeah, okay, too young there. But around about the 1960s it came in. Now, the interpretation of the word hors d'oeuvre basically means outside of work, hors meaning outside, and d'oeuvre is your work. Whilst other interpretations of this very word in different languages can also mean chef's masterpiece. Now, the hors d'oeuvre trolley consisted of 5 rotating shelves designed on decorative 4-wheel movable wooden trolley, and it was wheeled around a restaurant. Each of these 5 shelves contained 5 ceramic containers. Below this was a wooden shelf where you'd put things like plates and cutlery. Every evening, my first and most important job for the restaurant was to seek out trimmings, offcuts of meat, fish, you name it, anything from bread to potatoes, and everything and anything in between. Nothing within that kitchen was to go to waste. At the age of 16, with limited knowledge, I had to think quick and create 25 small dishes to fill 25 ceramic pots, each one of them to be placed on the trolley for the evening service. Every dish had to be scrutinized by the challenging, let's put it that way, executive chef. Not forgetting we were all working on classical French cuisine, ensuring the right presentation, the right sauces, the right dressings, the correct accompaniments for each and every dish. My lifesaver was the Répertoire de la Cuisine, written by a French chef to the Duke and Duchess of Roxburgh in London. This, I still have it today, is the original copy, and that was my biggest education at the age of 16. It classifies and highlights virtually every garnish that is needed in classical cuisine. And it has about 30 different classical accompaniments just for hard-boiled eggs. It has the same for poached eggs and scallop. It's got everything in there. It was my lifesaver. So looking and thinking about every food item within the kitchen and then marrying it up with a classical, which was all around me. One of the biggest challenges was not using anything whatsoever that the chefs actually needed for their own particular dish. So it was also about communication. And whilst I wasn't aware of it at the time, in effect, what I was delivering for the restaurant, because my wages were fairly cheap also, I was delivering a fantastic gross profit to the business. Items that could not be used anywhere else in the kitchen would have been possibly thrown away. They were all safe and edible, of course, but little trimmings of virtually everything. Sticking to the art of classic French cuisine allowed me to control my dishes, understanding them. And as a 16-year-old, to be able to do that and have free reign of the kitchen, or should I say the ingredients and offcuts, could have been disastrous for the chefs and for the restaurant. So it was a huge, huge challenge. I dreaded it at the time, in all honesty, because it was possibly too challenging for a young fella still learning, but I embraced the challenge. I took it on board. Each dish had classical accompaniments. And it was absolutely wonderful to be able to control, learn, and develop, and every dish be scrutinized, learn to understand other people's views, other chefs, and classical cuisine. Additionally, from this hors d'oeuvre trolley and my learning curve and the financial saving grace potentially for the restaurant was from the customer position. The trolley added visual stimulation. The guest could see and select what they would like to eat. It also added entertainment, interaction, skillmanship from the front of house team. Additionally, and also importantly, as a lot of you would appreciate, it took the pressure off the kitchen during busy periods. So in effect, a win-win situation, client, accountant, and of course the chef. Finally, for me, what's constantly living off my nerves is giving me a lifelong understanding of how to make a profit within the hospitality industry, making money without compromise, offering a wow factor using simple trimmings and offcuts. It's also taught me about garnishes, accompaniments, flavors, presentations, and textures. This had to be the number one lesson in culinary accountancy on how to survive in the restaurant and hotel business. As I moved from hotel to restaurant and even country to country to learn my craft, it quickly became apparent that my chosen profession was not just about being a chef and accountant. I also needed to become an architect, a builder, an author, a musician, an artist, a magician, a scientist, a psychologist, and now even a nutritionist. My additional self-inflicted roles I can add on to that list is a food archaeologist and an entertainer, both of which I love to do. To me, all of them have a great and even equal importance on the success of a business and of being a chef. Now, I've randomly selected a few examples. Let's start off with being a chef, accountant, architect. I'm going to ask another question, and I won't be able to hear an answer, but let's go with it. How many of you have pets or children? Well, this may resonate easily with you. Alternatively, the rest of you think back a few years to when you yourself were young children. As chefs, we all have to create and write recipes for the enjoyment of our fellow humans. But how many chefs think about our basic animal instincts? To some, it may come naturally, but the next time you think of creating or writing a recipe or menu, think about writing it for chimpanzees or monkeys or puppies. These need stimulation. Puppies and chimpanzees need entertainment. Both are happy surrounded with playthings. You know what? Think of the plate as a playground. A playground is a place that adds stimulation. It's got shapes, it's got textures, it's got colors, it's got things to keep us humans amused and entertained. And a well-designed dish can be constructed in exactly the same way. Having 5 or 7 elements on a plate will be stimulating for your guest. Oh, and let me also mention that I used odd numbers there, never even ones. Your guest will look at the plate, won't be able to decide which to tackle first. The excitement visually will be building up inside each element with possibly a different color, flavor, texture, not forgetting the organoleptic elements, that aroma that's coming from that dish. It allows you as a chef to add personality, a point of difference. It shows a different skill set and different styles of cooking methods. It allows you to reduce volumes whilst not looking mean. The guest does not want to potentially feel cheated, but by adding variety, you're able to offer visually more, incorporate cheaper elements to fill the plate, and financially achieve your targets without having to resort to pizza or pasta or mounds off. You want to create a playground that has sound quality cooking, skilled delivery, and marrying accompaniments. Just like the architect, draw each dish Pencil in and lay out. Arrange the presentation of each and every component. Work out the materials you're going to be used as well as the portion size. If it looks good on paper, there's a good chance it's going to look great on the plate. And that's when you start to become a builder and constructor of the dish. Implementing sound techniques and building on sound footings and foundations, you can now decide how you would like to build your plate in whichever style that defines you, your own personality, theme, restaurant, tradition, modern, historic, minimalist. It's your choice. How many of you directly or indirectly looked at a building, a town, a city, a landscape? How many of you thought it looked ugly? How ugly it was. And if only the town planners, the architects, builders, authorities could have actually worked better in designing the town in a constructive way, how much better it would have looked for the benefit of us all. Spending some time being a chef architect and builder could ensure your plate is as pretty as a picture for all to admire, and one your guest will want to visit time and time again. And whilst you're building and being an architect and a chef, you also need to be chef, builder, architect, and now author. Yes, your dish needs to tell a story. Here, as an author, you have an opportunity to show love, care, passion. Think of it as a book as, let's say, the 50 shades, or should I say 50 tastes of grey, if you like. This comes in the form of ingredients you choose, whether you are loving local seasonal ingredients, caring about the environment, the use of organic produce, or passionate about specific regions or producers. Animal welfare, or maybe you're a passionate hunter-gatherer. Why not? Seasonality can bring in change and options for the guest. It can bring freshness. It helps support and promote local business, even a region and country. It can add a difference by incorporating indigenous ingredients. It helps improve the talents and diversity of the chef. And it can also keep your food costs low, as normally food produced in season is cheaper and contains also far greater flavour. As you can see, it's one of my personal areas and passions, and I live to eat and I live around the seasons. As a regular traveller in normal times, I also root out restaurants that embrace a similar philosophy, as I aim to taste what a country or its cuisine is all about. In my view, a country's kitchen is where the heart lies. It's where the country lies. I also like to know that the plate has been thought about, created with a skilled architect, and built on sound environmental footings. And this last comment does not mean that a country or region's cuisine cannot be creative. That's where we start to become an artist. Each and every dish gives you an opportunity to engage with your audience, your guest. You may wish to write about mystery, romance, intrigue. As you take them on a journey, make your story interesting. Make your guest want to read another chapter. In effect, you want your guest to come back to read your story time after time, if you wish. The never-ending story. In relation to your guest, you want them to be queuing up, waiting for the new book release, or the new menu, or the new dish. Whilst my analogies can go on, and I've not even reached the part where we need to discuss to be an artist or a scientist or a psychologist, I will end this thought process on a musical note. For we also need to be musicians. Chef, musician, architect, builder, yeah, exactly. For musical compositions, you need to have the right notes and place them in the right order. One of my most memorable poor dining experience, and when you consider the amount of meals I have had since this experience, and it is still so vivid, I can still see the plate today, how horrendous that plate must have been. Just think about it, imagine it. Let me give you a perfect example of all the right notes, but all from a different musical performance, all on the same plate. It was as though, in reflection, the chef had been instructed over the telephone by the executive chef to offer me a starter of melon compote, followed by a fish course of gambas, and for mains, a fillet of beef. In effect, okay, perfectly accessible on the face of it, not a problem. Alas, my dish indeed consists of melon, flash grilled gamba with a white wine sauce, perfectly satisfactory. But alas, this is where the notes started to go a bit flat, because on the same plate was also the fillet of beef in red wine sauce, accompanied with the Ogun melon, warm Ogun melon, also on the same plate. All I can say is if the chef was an artist, he would be Picasso. If he was a musician, he would certainly have been deaf. Alternatively, he must have been higher than the Beatles back in the 1960s. Alas, I'm sure you can tell, it was not a good gastronomic experience. In a nutshell, think of your main ingredient, build around it with marrying accompaniments, think about the playground of colors and textures, tell your story with local and seasonal, and you won't go far wrong. Now, I hope that this has in some way caused food for thought, triggered a few ways for you to continue building your path to success whilst taking achievable routes to make it financially viable without compromise. As mentioned before this, it's fairly generic, and anyone who needs assistance in building and developing process based on a one-to-one consultancy tailored specifically for your own needs, please do not hesitate to give me a shout. I'm always available also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And all I can say now is, once again, sorry I can't be there in person, but hopefully I will soon. I've had the vaccine, and now I should be able to fly soon. But all I can say is thank you very, very much for listening.